Hey, campfire crew. Let's get it on.
Be careful now. You know what happened to his last whore? She died. She died an ugly, ugly death.
Bingham's Light by Geek Dad NSC. In the very rural area I live in, there are quite a few ghost stories, tales, legends, and superstitions. One such ghost story is called the Bingham Light. The story goes that a train conductor fell from the train while waving his lantern to warn someone on the track the train was coming. So he supposedly fell from the train and it cut off his head. Now you can see the light of his lantern at the place where the tracks used to be. It's a well-known story from my area, and people would constantly go out to the area in search of the light. It was a popular hangout spot for high school students and adults to go out there, get drunk, and test their courage against the light. The National Guard even went out to the location with night vision goggles to try to solve the mystery of the light. It came up empty. I had heard the story my whole life, but never made it out there till I was an adult. The first time out there, it was scary, partly from the ghost story, but also because of some of the living beings who showed up on that particular night. So, the area the light shows up in is at the end of a dirt road next to an open field surrounded by a swamp. We were excited to be there and had some amazing luck because we saw the light floating at the end of the road as soon as we turned onto the dirt road. We slowly drove toward it, and when we were maybe 100 yards away, it vanished. So we pulled up and got out of the car, and that's when we saw the light was now behind us, back toward the entrance to the road. There were 5 of us in the group. Me, my best friend, his girlfriend, her brother, and the brother's girlfriend. The stories about the light say if you yell or shoot at it, it will change colors. And the brother started yelling at the light, saying, "I have your head!" The rest of us told him to stop. We don't believe that taunting the supernatural is a good idea, but he ignored us and kept yelling, and the light actually went from a yellowish light to a deep red. It started moving toward us, but then turned sharply left and disappeared into the swamp. It was a crazy experience, and our adrenaline was pumping because we were all terrified when it changed colors and started coming towards us. We all stood there comparing notes on what we'd witnessed, and that's when we saw headlights on the other end of the road as a vehicle approached. We should have just gotten into the car and left, but we didn't. We were having a good time, and we didn't want it to end. Besides, we figured the new arrivals were just like us, and just looking to have a good time and see the light. When they arrived, there were 2 guys in a beat-up pickup truck. They got out and said hi, and we returned the greeting. They asked if we had seen the light, and we told them yeah, and shared our story. And they began to share their experiences as they were regulars out there. They told us that they knew the old tracks were in the swamp just beyond the field. One of them offered to walk us over and show us, and we were excited and gladly accepted. It ended up all of us walking over. One of them was in front of us, the other in the back. I started to get a bad feeling. I don't know why, they'd done nothing wrong, but something was telling me this was not a good idea. We were about 50 yards from the tree line of the swamp when all of a sudden I saw the light to my left out of the corner of my eye. I stopped everyone and said, "Hey, there it goes." It vanished as fast as it had appeared, but as I looked in that direction, I noticed the guy who was leading us, who was slightly to my left, had a long knife hiding in his hand close to his leg. I never would have noticed it in the dark, especially since I was looking straight ahead, intent on our destination. Anyway, a shiver ran down my spine as I tried to figure out what to do. I just knew if we walked into that swamp, something bad was about to happen. I checked my watch and said, "Oh, wow, it's later than I thought. And my wife's waiting for me." The guys tried to talk us into continuing, as it was really close and it wouldn't take long. I just said, "I can't. I really have to get home." I tensed up, waiting for them to do something as we turned and started walking back to the car. I stayed where I could keep an eye on both of them as we made our way back. We ended up getting into the car and driving off without incident. I told my friends what I had seen, and they freaked out too. They hadn't noticed it. We agreed we owed the light a debt of gratitude. I'm not saying the light was trying to protect us, but I am sure thankful it showed up when it did. I still get a cold chill when I think about what could have happened. Delivery that made us quit DoorDashing by the Top Queen Kea. So, at the start of the year, my partner, 23-year-old male, and I, a 23-year-old female, were DoorDashing on the weekends and some weekdays from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. We were at it for a few months and never had any issues with weirdos or bad situations, but when this happened, it scared us so bad we never went back out to dash. One night, we had a delivery to one of those apartment complexes that suck to navigate. The apartments were inside buildings that you could only access through a locked door, and either the buildings had no labels or they were extremely hard to find because we were looking for this guy's section for over 5 minutes. It was 1 a.m., dark as hell, and a weekday, so nobody was around. The complex didn't necessarily look sketchy like the others we'd been to, so I figured it was okay. When we finally thought we found the building, I got out of the car and walked up to the locked door, followed the instructions to get in, and the door didn't unlock. So I was trying to get in touch with the customer, letting them know the door was locked and repeating the instructions, all that jazz. The dude didn't answer for over 15 minutes. At some point, my partner was standing outside the door waiting with me. And there we were, looking dumb as hell, standing outside a locked door with a DoorDash bag for what felt like forever. When the customer finally answered, he told me I was at the wrong section. He was at the door and didn't see me. At that point, we'd wasted so much time waiting that I just took off running towards what I thought was the correct section. I don't know why. I think I was frustrated and extremely stressed out by the whole thing. I told my partner to get back in the car and follow me. While I was running, I came across this man who couldn't have been much older than me standing at the back door outside of one of the buildings. He was leaning on the rail smoking a cigarette. I briskly walked up, smiling, holding the bag on display so he didn't think I was running up on him for no reason. I asked if he had a DoorDash order, and you're not supposed to do that. I was just so sure it was this guy, the only person standing right outside a building. He looked at me for a second, not meeting my eyes, and I could tell this guy was high as shit. That really didn't bother me, though, because everyone smoked in that city, including me. He answered, yeah, no, I didn't get anything. His demeanor was a bit off, and it took him way too long to think about whether he ordered a DoorDash or not. But I shrugged it off as him being high. I thanked him, apologized, and kept running down the sidewalk to try to find this dang section. I got to the end of the street and looked around, still not seeing a single sign or symbol indicating what the buildings were. I got my phone back out and was staring hard at the map, thinking maybe I could just run to where the customer GPS point was, which wasn't actually too far from me. I turned around and saw my partner had finally come around the bend, but he too stopped at that guy standing outside to ask if he had a DoorDash order. His passenger side was facing towards the guy. My partner had the window rolled down, I guess asking him or talking to him. I didn't see this man actually say a single word to my partner, but I did see him get off the rail and start walking to the driver's side of my partner's car, one hand in his front sweatshirt pocket. A sickening feeling instantly rose in my gut. It's so hard to describe because I had never felt anything like that before. My heart was beating so fast I couldn't feel it. My throat was tight. I felt such an immense sense of dread, and every part of me screamed, "Danger!" I was sprinting at the car before I even realized what I was doing, and I still clearly remember thinking to myself, No, No, please don't hurt my baby. I managed to reach the car right as the guy was rounding the front bumper, and with adrenaline flooding my system, I got between him and the driver's side door he was approaching. I all but thrust the DoorDash bag in front of him with a big, fat, fucking fake smile on my face. I can't remember the tone I used, but I know I was insistent, and I said, "This is your order, right? I'm so sorry. I was really confused by the complex." He paused for a moment before taking the bag and said, Yeah, this is mine. My bad, I'm high as fuck." And he went back inside the building he was standing outside of. I immediately got my ass back in the car, locked the doors, and told my partner to take us home now. We were done for the night. I couldn't stop shaking. After about 10 minutes of a very quiet drive, the actual customer from the dash we just did texted me. "Hey, it says delivered, but I didn't get it?" I just let him know I was sorry. Something went wrong, and I was working with DoorDash to get him a refund or a new order. Once we got home, we did get it all sorted out, but it didn't matter. We ended up deleting the apps and never going on another delivery again. At the time, my partner said he didn't feel threatened, but when we talked about it recently, he admitted that night was why he never wanted to DoorDash again. Honestly, I don't know if that guy had malicious intentions. The whole thing was really unsettling, but I will never forget how he approached the car with his hand in his pocket like that.
A strange upbringing. My family moved into a house when I was about 3 years old. My brother was 6 at the time, and my parents were just looking to get a bigger place than what we had. It wasn't far away from where we were living at the time, and in fact, it was a close friend of the family who was selling the place. After a couple of beers, my father actually bought the place on a handshake deal, and they got the bank stuff done later. We moved out when I was 13, and my parents never came out and said anything about what happened in those 10 years. However, when I was about 20 years old, my mother finally told us that the woman who owned the home before my parents bought it had hung herself in a bedroom on the second floor. Growing up, the story was that she died in her sleep. I guess my parents didn't want me and my brother being scared by any stories, just the crazy shit that happened there. The neighborhood is a great one. It's off the main strip in a quiet suburb of Buffalo, New York, and has no through traffic. The block, as it was shaped like a P, and on the opposite end of the main drag runs a creek. Quiet, peaceful. I'd pick up a house there in a second, but probably not the one I grew up in. It was a 3-bedroom house with a half-finished basement. All the bedrooms were on the second floor with a large living room and dining room on the first. Not a huge place, but not too small either. I shared a room with my brother for about 7 years, and we had plenty of fun getting into trouble and all that, but we also didn't push the envelope with my parents. We had an interest in the paranormal, and mine probably a little more than just an interest, and many things we saw or heard were blamed on the fact that I happened to be reading something about ghosts. My first recollection is about the time I was 6 or so. We would often wake up in the middle of the night to hear footsteps coming from the basement. At first my father told us it was just the furnace, and we bought that logical answer. Until the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. I can still remember hearing that boom of the furnace kicking in. That I did recognize as a logical answer. But then there was the soft padding of footsteps coming up the basement stairs, and then on the set from the first floor to the second. It was always soft, but loud enough to know that they weren't sounds from the furnace. They would come down the hallway, which was a straight shot from the stairs ending in a cluster of 3 bedrooms. Then they would stop at our bedroom door. When I was 10, I moved into the room across the hall, and the sounds stopped. One night, a friend of mine, let's call him Jay, was going to stay overnight, and we were going to sleep on the front porch. Why? We were dorks. This was the early 80s, man. Give me a break. My brother and Jay's older brother were going to camp out in the backyard in my brother's pup tent. At around 3:30, my moms came out and dragged us into the living room. We were sleeping through a thunderstorm and didn't even realize we were getting soaked. Still groggy from sleeping, we plopped onto the floor and dozed off again. At 4:15, and I'll never forget the time as long as I live, I felt something was wrong. I was facing our fireplace that sat at the one end of the living room, and I could see a white figure reflected in the glass. It was behind us at the far end of the room. I noticed that it seemed to be falling and trying to catch its balance or something, hold on to the TV, a chair, the large sofa that we had. I punched Jay to wake him up, but it was nothing doing. He didn't wake up. I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. Later that morning, after my dad went to work at about 5:30, Jay woke up and said he heard muffled musical notes. Not too loud, but enough to get his attention. When he woke me up to hear it, the sounds had stopped. I immediately thought it was my brother screwing around, but we soon found out that he and Jay's brother had slept in the basement after the tent they were in was being pelted with rocks at about 2:30 in the morning, right before the storm hit. My brother had a trumpet, and Jay said the musical notes sounded like a horn, so we bolted upstairs to check things out. In my brother's room, the trumpet had been in its case and stashed in the closet the day before, but was now standing upright in the middle of the floor. The case was opened, standing on its end in the closet. We didn't tell anybody about what we had heard and saw. About a year and a half later, Jay was spending the night once again, but this time we were sleeping in my bedroom. Our heads were together near the door of the room, with Jay lying parallel to the bunk bed setup that split the room down the middle. I was at the foot of the beds. Sometime in the night, Jay woke up and saw a dark figure standing over him. He could only make out part of the head, but said it seemed like it was kind of lolling to one side and that it had really messy hair. He closed his eyes and went back to sleep, thinking it was a dream. When he woke up in the light of the morning, he yelled to me. He was still in his sleeping bag, but on the other side of the bed. The bottom bunk was only maybe 6 inches off the floor, so there was no way he could have slid underneath it to end up on the other side by his own volition. And let me take a moment and explain to you that Jay and his family are one of the most religious families I know. They still are. They were the family that got my family back to attending church, and we're still friends to this day. Jay was a little more than freaked out, to say the very least, after that. As time wore on, I found that some of my friends really didn't like my house. It gave them the creeps. They were fine during the day, but at night, nobody really wanted to hang around. My brother and I never felt threatened, and my parents certainly never said anything happened to them. Not long after that, one of my schoolmates came over on Easter break. I'll call him S. My parents and brother went to visit my grandmother in a nearby town, and the two of us went down to the creek to goof off and grab a smoke. It started to get nasty out. Rain, sleet, kind of ruined the idea of hanging around outside. We came back to my house and were just bullshitting about girls and stuff. We actually had my tape recorder rolling while we were talking. At one point, S said, "Hey, I think your parents are home." I hadn't heard anything and disagreed. We kept talking, and again he interrupted with, "Seriously, your mom's calling you." I went to the stairs and called down to see if anybody was there. No answer. S was starting to get weirded out, but I told him not to worry about it. He was probably just hearing something from outside. Then I heard the voice. All of this was on tape, mind you. I started explaining the situation on the tape, and during my speaking, the voice called me again. This time, it was clearly on the tape. We played it back, and sure enough, right before I yelled out, "Holy shit!" you could hear a high-pitched female voice calling my name. We ran around the house and looked for anything that might show some trickery was going on, but there was nothing. My family got home about an hour or so later, and we played the tape for my brother. He listened with open ears and wide eyes. I actually took the tape to school and played it for my class, and everybody was pretty spooked, especially my friends. Sadly, and this is something I cannot explain, the tape just disappeared one day. I honestly have no idea what happened to it. Occasional strange sounds came and went, but nothing severe happened until the next year. My best friend to this day, and let's call him K, was staying overnight one winter, and we were about 12 years old. I had a dual cassette deck tape player, man, that was a big deal in 1986, and it kept turning on and off all night long. I unplugged it and pushed it under my bed. I was sleeping on the floor while Kay was sleeping on my bed. With the cord unplugged, that puppy came on 3 times in the night. After the first time, I stopped hitting the stop button once I realized that the radio had been unplugged, and there was nothing I could do. In the last year we lived there, a lot of smaller things happened, some with higher frequency. Doing the laundry became a royal pain in the ass because anyone who would start the wash would come down to put the wet stuff in the dryer only to find the lid on the washer open. This wasn't a once-in-a-while occurrence. It happened all the time and to everybody in the house, including my parents. If it were a once-in-a-while kind of thing, I'd be left to believe that whomever was doing the wash was just forgetful and didn't shut the washer lid. It happened so many times, I've ruled out that possibility. One December, we went to get a Christmas tree with Jay's family. We were gone for a few hours, having a great time, and headed home after getting trees that we had cut down. A few minutes after we pulled into our driveway, a police car rolled up, and the officer started talking to my dad. Apparently, while we were gone, our phone repeatedly called 911 and sent the police to our house. There was no one home, and the place was still locked. The officer clearly saw that no one was there. He wanted to just verify that the family was okay and that no one was in the house in danger. He was a little perplexed, though. It never happened again after that. Stuff would get lost easily, too. Usually they were smaller items like watches and jewelry, but one time my father went down to a shop area to grab a circular saw. We were going to our place at a lake south of Buffalo and had to build a new deck for the camp. The rest of the family was in the car waiting to shove off when he came roaring out of the house mad as hell. The saw wasn't in his shop. And the old man had many moments like the father in Gene Shepard's A Christmas Story, where he would get so mad he couldn't form sentences and ended up just swearing a blue streak. That's what he did. He went back into the house and tore through it, coming up with nothing. Naturally, my brother and I got blamed for doing something to it. That was a negative. We hadn't touched it. My mom told my dad that he probably let somebody borrow it, or maybe he left it at our place on the lake. He was royally pissed off, but did call a friend to borrow his saw for the weekend, and we left. When we got home after that weekend, we found a nice surprise. The saw was sitting in the middle of the living room floor. Not long after that, I was just hanging around the house by myself one Saturday night while my parents were out somewhere. My brother was at his friend's house, Dee, who lived a couple of lots away from our place. I remember I was listening to Van Halen 2 at top volume doing something on the computer, my old Apple IIe. I love that thing. Then I heard something that I thought was on the record. I put the needle back on the song to see if I could hear it again, but it wasn't there. I stopped the record player and then heard the sound of my dad's circular saw running in the basement. I just about shit my pants and called Dee's house to talk to my brother and him, and when they answered, I just started yelling for them to get their ass over here. They both showed up a few minutes later, and we went down into the basement. The saw was in its drawer and unplugged. Shortly after that incident, we moved to another house in the same neighborhood, but not much happened there, maybe one or two things, but nothing like in the other place. It wasn't until later that other things began happening to me in other houses I would live in, but I'll save those for another time. Before I end, I'd like to throw this out there. I do believe it's possible that some sort of telekinetic power may have caused these things to happen, and there may be a scientific reason for all the strange stuff that we experienced. But I really can't say. I just don't know.
Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh@truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you caught this on YouTube and you like what you heard and saw, give a video a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, why not subscribe today? Maybe even tell a friend about the channel. I'd appreciate it. If you'd like to take your support a step further, find a link to my Patreon page, and of course, purchase some Uncle Josh or Campfire Crew merchandise. There's a link to my TeePublic storefront in the description too. If you're new to the channel, you'll notice that this is titled 2 for Tuesday, and you might have seen that I've got a number of 2 for Tuesdays in my catalog. I'm going to bring it back for a little bit, and yes, it's usually 3 stories, but 3 for Tuesday sounds stupid. If you think this is a good move, or you don't like it, let me know in the comments below or shoot me an email. I've also gotten a lot of requests about my personal stories. I know they're buried here somewhere in these volumes. I'll try to dig them out. I'm not going to recreate them. I'll just find them and then post them as maybe its own episode. Creepy shit that's happened to Uncle Josh. Look for that in the future. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.